Hi class, this is Julia Head, and for the story that I'm reviewing this week, it's called Duffer Dysfunction, and I have my notes down here, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So this story is about a guy named Carl Roper who is a professional golfer. So kind of, background about his life is he would golf after school at his dad's golf club, and it was a really good outlet his parents thought for him because, he wasn't getting into anything, I guess. And when he was around 12 years old, one of the pros that work at the golf club realized he had a really good natural swing, and it said that he could hit the ball 220 yards, which is pretty far when you're 12 years old, especially for real golf. So later on, he would win two years after he started taking his golf lessons, he won the club's junior golf championship, and then he joined the golf team in high school, and as a freshman, he was still the best golfer on the team, so obviously he had a natural talent for golfing. So then he continued to golf when he was in college and brought his team to the NCAA championship his sophomore year of college. And through when he was in school, he was really popular. He had a lot of different girlfriends. He was in a fraternity. But he decided to leave university to go pro. So he chose the money over finishing his schooling, which wasn't detrimental to him at all since he did win a lot of tournaments. He didn't win any of the top-notch tournaments that are the really important ones in the PGA. And the PGA is the Professional Golf Administration, so it's the highest you can get when you play golf. So he was on tour for 20 years because they're just on tour constantly. I know a lot about golf, even though I don't even play it. So during his golfing, when he was on tour, he was definitely a ladies' man, so a lot of the women that he, had relationships or one-night stands with were connected to the golf scene. So his first wife, who he was married to for 2 years, worked at the concession stand at one of the tours, and then that marriage fell apart because his rank was declining and he started drinking. And then 3 years later, he married another woman who had nothing to do with golf. She was a barmaid at his favorite tavern that he liked to go to, and he decided to come back on his drinking, and his golf rank improved. So obviously his rank was declining because he was drinking, because his marriage was falling apart. And then, so his second marriage fell apart because they couldn't conceive any children. So he left the PGA at age 42, and he went back to his old golf club. They knew him. He was a legend there, so he became a pro to teach other people how to play golf. So when you go to a golf club, the pro is an old professional golf player that will give you lessons at work. They'll help you choose what clubs to buy if you're buying stuff like that. So he didn't like to teach kids. He wanted to teach middle-aged rich women, and he had a lot of affairs with them, but knew that it didn't mean anything because they weren't going to leave their rich husband, and if someone started to catch feelings, he'd just cut them off. So clearly he wasn't the greatest person morally, I guess, at least in my opinion, because that's cheating. It's no good. So when he was 50, he was missing golf a lot. He didn't want to be a pro anymore. It was boring. So he went back on the PGA, but because he was older, he had to be on the senior PGA tour. So it's just one notch below the regular PGA, so it's still important. And he won a bunch of tournaments on that. So he was still, even though he was in his old age, as the book said, he wasn't performing sexually as well as he used to, and he would have erectile dysfunction on occasion. So basically this story is about his issues with ED and how he was on a plane one time and saw an advertisement for this natural supplement called Trojan, not the condoms. It was just some supplement that was supposed to help you with your erectile dysfunction, and that because it was natural, obviously it was safe, when the whole point of the story is that that's not always the case. So he bought it, and he met up with some lady, they had sex, and the next morning she couldn't wake him up because he had died overnight, and he died with an erection still, which is weird. That doesn't really happen. So they found when they through the autopsy, no, so after he was carried away, obviously the medical examiners, people that doing the autopsy, were having a field day because he died with an erection, and that's just kind of, I don't know, I guess it's funny to them, but he really died because of a heart attack from the supplement that he took. So they send it off to the lab from the author, as like happens in every story in this book, and they found 2 compounds. I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but it was hydroxyhomosildenafil and acetyldenafil. So they didn't know what these compounds were. So he found one of them in China, the hydroxy whatever one, and it was really expensive. It was $1,000 for 200 pounds, and obviously they didn't even need that much, but they needed to figure out what it was, so they just bought it anyways, and they couldn't find anywhere to buy the acetyldenafil compound. So through the autopsy, they found that there was an excessive amount of sildenafil in his blood and urine, which caused his heart attack, and that he also had Viagra-like chemicals. So basically the natural supplement Trojan that he took was like a designer drug off-brand version of Viagra, I guess. So it was Viagra, but not as safe, I guess. It wasn't the exact same thing because it was natural instead of chemically made, even though there are still chemicals in it. So he died, which is always tragic, but the point of this story is to warn people, making that just because something's natural doesn't mean it's always good for you, and that in the book he explicitly states that just because it's natural doesn't mean it's not toxic. There are plenty of natural compounds that you can find in nature that are toxic. Like there are poisonous mushrooms and poisonous berries and stuff, but just because they're found in nature doesn't mean they're like safe and good for you. So also it warns against taking natural supplements from an unreliable source. So, he just saw the advertisement in a magazine, didn't do any prior or further research after that before he got it. So the reason for that is because if it's from an unreliable source, it's not from a major drug company, I guess, natural supplements aren't FDA approved. They don't go through the process. They're not regulated by the FDA, and they aren't always all natural, which is what happened in this case because he had these 2 really long chemicals that weren't actually natural. So with this story, they actually reached out to the company that was the manufacturer of the hydroxydenafil drug that made it, and they never responded, and then that manufacturer shut down because they had a recall of Trojan because it wasn't safe, obviously. He died from a heart attack. So, yeah, at the end, the last couple words is really just saying buyer beware. Just beware of what you're buying. Because you just shouldn't always know what you're putting in your body, and that the point really is that just be careful if you're taking something new. So I had no idea what the story was going to be about. I didn't think it was going to be about erectile dysfunction. I thought he was going to have taken shrooms or something in the woods at a golf club. I don't know, but took a turn. But I actually like this story because I can't relate to it. I can only relate to it on the golf front because my family is really big in golf. I don't like golf, but I knew everything that they were talking about, so it felt familiar to me when they were talking about him working at the country club, because I used to work at a golf club and stuff like that. So the story was pretty interesting, and I think it's an important message for people to just beware of what they're buying. Like it said, buyer beware. So that's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.